And yeah, I'm sharing the screen. How do I flip over? The-
Just hit stop here. Okay.
Yeah. And these times they do, and it was a little higher, it was not as high as it was. But the good news is, it's about 91. Like, that was last week. Yeah. Yeah, say hi to you. John. There is some Eddie Neal, all different tours. If you're going to spring break, I'll give contract dates. Yeah. They start looking for competition. They're one.
But then you got a lot of conversations coming out in January, and I'm trying to focus on some things like those. Oh, wow.
And we.
Process when you get to the facility. Excellent. They are like, great, just 2 miles from them. It's like all those hotels and then right as well are paying enough. To do it.
Yeah.
No way. Yeah.
We had a new executive director, who's very motivated.
In area of accommodations. Pebble Beach, Cape Canaveral was first, Melbourne second, Titusville is third. Above Melbourne and the South Beaches, Island, East, Vieira should be coming up too.
You would think, yeah, you would think that there's some people there. They don't, it's because they're not a municipality, they're never gonna get credit for it. Because the tax collector only looks at the municipality, they're not gonna look at.
Right.
Zero considered a. No, it's, well, it's unincorporated. But it's development.
Yeah, very good, thank you. Okay.
This is a really, really nice piece. It's like, is this the vacation guide or is this?
No, that's that's for, it's basically a magazine. It's one for, people within the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, mentioned surfing sand
Out here.
Probably somewhere, I'm sure.
Nice picture of those men.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
I did.
All right.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Julie Braga. I'm the chair of the beach committee. I want to welcome you all here. Thank you so much for taking the time and making this commitment and taking the call from your appointees. What we're going to do first is, well, one thing that's very important about this is you're all here, and it's very important that we all, as we serve on this committee, is to make the meetings as much as possible. So I see some new faces and we get a lot done, hopefully very, very quickly. But you've been appointed to this position. We want to remind everyone that this is what we're doing here is really, really important. So we're going to start with introductions. Let's go around and
I am Peter Trainus, I work for the Space Coast Office of Tourism.
But, are the mics on or off? Looks like they're on.
If they're green, it's
Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Lee Thompson. I'm a co-owner of BC Crossroads Seafood Restaurant in Titusville.
I am Hunter Joslin with Indo Board Balance Training.
Ruby Daniel. I'm with Beachside VR and Cape Crossing Resort and Marina.
Everybody, John Giantonio, I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Tourism.
Hello, Joanna Brooks, Administrative Assistant at Office of Tourism.
I'm Gwen Pierce. I'm the city clerk for the city of Satellite Beach.
Hi, I'm Gina Parrish. I'm the environmental manager out at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
I'm Charlie Nudo. I'm with American Public University.
Angela Essing. I'm with the tourism office.
Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, I'm Julie Braga with the residents in Melbourne. I am the general manager of the TDC. And we'll go.
Mike McGarry with Brevard County's Natural Resource Management Office, and I manage the county's beach restoration program.
My name is John Nico. I'm with Keep Brevard Beautiful. I'm the new incoming executive director.
I'm Nicola Van from Florida.
Welcome. And joining us via Zoom is,
Yeah, I'm Daniel Clodney. I apologize I couldn't be there in person. I caught my toddler's cold flu and I didn't want to give it to y'all. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program.
thank you for staying home. Okay, if that's everyone, our first order of business is that, because Daniel's being so responsible, I need a vote for him to be able to vote via Zoom. Can I get a motion?
I move that Daniel Kolodny be able to vote on the Zoom meeting format.
Or second.
After a second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. You're stuck with us, Daniel. You have to stay on the meeting. You may don't feel good. Okay. The next thing we want to know is just to review the agenda. I don't think we need to vote on. No. Okay. And our approval of the Beach Improvement Committee minutes from July 18th. Okay. Oh yeah, just because before, right. All of you completed your disclosure forms. Is there anybody that needs to declare conflict? Yes, Lorraine?
I sit on the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute Board of Trustees, so it was suggested that I mention them. I don't think we're doing any voting on them or anything today, but I'm doing what I was asked to do.
Good citizen, thank you. Yeah,
I sit on the Keep Brevard Beautiful board also, so I disclose that.
okay, thank you.
And I sit on the Merritt Island Wildlife Association Board, and we have received funds from PDC for projects to help the refuge.
Mhm.
Me too.
Yeah, we did.
Those are capital funds, they're not beach funds, but better to disclose.
Yeah, this is the most disclosure, you're the most active volunteer. So, yes.
So my employer is the city of Satellite Beach, and we have also received grant funding from this committee in the past.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move forward. Thank you all. We need to select the vice chair. Oh, so we didn't vote on it. Okay, I got so there were so many disclosures that threw me off. So I'm sorry. Can I please get a motion to approve the minutes from the July 18th meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Riley and Gina. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. That's the hard part of the meeting. So you've all successfully completed that. So up next is Mike.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Mike, I thought we did that right. I'm sorry. Okay, let's disclose something. I flew in from Chicago this morning. I've been up since 2:30 in the morning. So that was like, I'm gonna just bake it till I make it, but clearly that's not working. So let's pick a vice chair. Want to volunteer? Okay. I think that would be great. Any other volunteers? Okay, so we just need a motion. Approve Laura Lee Thompson as the vice chair of the beach committee.
I'll move to approve Laura Lee Thompson as the vice chair of the committee.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Lorraine. I appreciate it. I think you were on vice chair last time, so thank you so much.
Yeah, you never miss a meeting, so it's not anything that's dangerous.
Okay, so now.
We prefer now to.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay, are you going to have Mike first? Yeah, Mike, are you ready to take us?
I hope so.
We have it, yep.
You'll start the show. Am I doing both first or beaches first?
Both.
Okay.
That's what this says. Oh, beaches are both, okay.
Okay, so Matt Culver, who's also with the Natural Resources Office, manages the boating program, including derelict vessel removal. He had a conflict today out of town at a management meeting, so he asked that I review his work over the past few years or last couple of years with tourism funds. So the slide number 2. I gotta start at the beginning. Matt put it together. It'll make sense if we start at the beginning. Okay, so this is just a quick summary of Brevard has a lot of water, and it means like a lot of coast, just like we have a lot of beaches, we have a lot of waterway, and over 335,000 registered vessels, so a lot of boats here. And Matt, much of it is federally regulated, but the county works to facilitate derelict vessel removal. So this is the process. Can you get rid of that thing across the bottom so I can see the whole screen? Put it on presentation mode. Yeah, put it on presentation mode.
It's in PDF.
Okay.
The way we have it set up, so
Okay.
this is the best we can get.
Okay.
Yeah.
So over time, Matt and the county, mostly with state and federal grants, but also with tourism grants, and a little bit of general revenue, have removed over 310,000 vessels. You can see the numbers, over 900 tons of materials from the lagoon. Next. Okay, a lot of people, the penalties, you and others say, why don't the owners deal with it? Law enforcement tries to make them deal with it, but a lot of the people who have these vessels, the vessels are lost because the people that own them just don't have enough money, and law enforcement does go after them to make them pay the cost after the fact. They can put charges on them, even take their driver's license, but there are cases where you'd be waiting forever for the owner to get it out. So the county, with law enforcement backing, removes them. This is 2006, and this is here, it's after the 2004 and 5 hurricanes. You can see 71 derelict vessels scattered all over the county. And you don't need to see the specific, just the distribution. They're from north to south. So that's 2006. Now go next one. This is 2023. There were 70 in 2006. In 2023, there were 64 vessels. Initially, that was at the last TDC update. And since that time, 85 vessels have been removed. And you might think, well, that's a mistake. There were only 84 available. Since that time, 85 have been removed. It's not a mistake. They keep stacking up. So you remove them and more show up. So it's, even though when Matt was here the last time, he said they were 64 vessels. Since that time, the program has removed 85 vessels. Now in 2024, the present state there are 73 vessels derelict, and 35 of them are authorized for removal. For those of you who have not heard this before, just because it's derelict, it takes law enforcement somewhere between 3 or 4 months and a year to properly notify the owner. They have to serve them legally to say, this is your boat. If you don't address it, we're gonna take it. So that's why there's a difference between how many are derelict, and on the order of half of them are authorized for removal. So this is, I think, since your last update, there's 35 vessels awaiting removal. That's currently, and of the, I forget how many, I told you 80 vessels have been removed. MAP leverages a lot of funds. So 32 vessels were removed for $231,000 by getting a FWC grant where they gave the Natural Resources Office, Matt Culver, the money, and he executed removal of 32 boats with state money. In addition to that, 21 boats were removed with TDC funding through this committee for about $120,000. And the state also has a program where they remove them themselves without the county playing a role. So that's 32 that were removed by Fish and Wildlife with, you know, in the do-it-yourself. They hire a contractor themselves. And with remaining tourism funds from the last funding Matt received through the Tourism Development Office, there's about $25,000 left, and Matt believes that will do somewhere between 3 to 5 vessels, depending on their size. And I think that will likely be consumed in the next 6 months or so. He works hard to make sure, get the state to remove all of them, they will with their money, and then use the tourism money for the ones that are not getting state money for one reason or another. So since the program began somewhere around 2005, I think is, well, there it says over 16 years, over 1.4 million has been spent removing the 310,000 derelict vessels. Most of it has been grant money, a lot of state grants. The voter registration fees pay for some of it. The county commission has funded some of it with general fund, but due to Matt's hard work, we've gotten a lot of outside funding sources for leverage. And this is just a picture of some of the work. Typically, they go up with that excavator on a barge and pick them up, put them on a barge, take them to a boat ramp where they can put them in a dumpster and send them to a landfill. And that's it. It says questions. I'll do my best. I'm not the true expert, but Matt does work, you know, in the office with me, so I may know the basics.
Okay, go ahead, sir. So first, I just have 2 questions, and hopefully they're easy ones. So how are these reported? Are they reported by people who are out on the waterways, or is it, because I'm sure the county doesn't have somebody going around looking for derelict vessels?
The county has one person who does boating, and that's Matt Culver. After a big storm, he will occasionally go out, spend a day running, you know, he might run the north half of the county and look. Many of them are reported by citizens, and also the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission will, if they see a new one, you know, it's their job. If it's an obvious derelict, something sunk, then it's their job to notice it and contact the owner. So it's a combined effort of citizens, the county, as well as law enforcement.
Okay, and that kind of transitions into my second question about the FWC. Is there specific criteria for them to remove a vessel? Does it have to be in a certain area? Is it why is it they'll only receive they pick and choose what they want to do, but is there like a criteria for that? Or how to decide that?
They don't pick and choose entirely, but in their defense, and I'm not making excuses, they've only got a few officers to cover 71 miles of the county, and only not all the officers have the expertise for derelict vessel. To be derelict, it has to be more than simply an ugly boat hanging on an anchor. That alone isn't enough to make it derelict. It has to, it has to be like clearly open to the weather. If it's missing hatches and half full of rainwater, well, then they would likely declare that derelict. Or if it's sunk, they'll declare it derelict. If it's just anchored without an anchor light, then it's not derelict, and they might send the owner a ticket that says, hey, you gotta fix your anchor light. But there are clear state laws for how to determine it's derelict.
I think it also has, if it's a navigation hazard, I think that raises the level of the process to make it derelict.
Yes, that is true.
And then they'll take it, they'll get rid of it, usually. If it's,
Although if
We would hope.
it's just a nice boat anchored in the middle of the intercoastal, they won't determine it derelict. They will contact the owner and write them a big ticket and say, you gotta get that thing out of the channel. But certainly hazard to navigation vessels get attention more promptly.
Great questions. Any other questions? Yes, Riley?
Yes.
If there's a derelict boat that's like on the shoreline, but it's on someone's property, can the person who owns the property, do they get a chance to have that boat?
finders keepers,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. And my off the cuff is probably not, because someone owns it, and frankly, it's easier to get an abandoned car out of your front yard than an abandoned boat out of your backyard. I know Bob Barker suffered with a boat on the shoreline of his property and it was on land, but I don't think it just automatically becomes yours, but you'd have to consult with law enforcement on that one.
Okay,
thank you.
any other questions? Okay, wonderful. Before we switch to beach, I just wanted to have Tom do a quick introduction.
Oh.
Welcome.
I apologize for being late. It's the old thing, if you didn't have employees or guests, your job. would be very- My name's Tom Williams, and I'm with Ocean Partners Hospitality here in Cocoa Beach. We own and operate 4 hotels.
Thank you for being here. Okay,
Slide one, if you don't mind, if the arrows work, which they do, I'm gonna just swipe your keyboard and push the arrow. Yeah, getting up slack. Okay, so some of you have been here before, have seen this map, but there's some new faces, and I just sort of wanted to run through our projects. Brevard County, with Tourism Development Beach Funds, manages 4 major beach project areas from Port Canaveral south of Sebastian Inlet. It's about 35 miles of shoreline that we actively manage. It's designated as critically eroding shoreline by the state, which means not only does it mean the beach needs maintenance, but it also means we're eligible for state funding. I'll sort of go down from the top, and I always throw a curve. The one on the top, Brevard County, is not actually the local sponsor. It's the Canaveral Harbor Sand Bypass. That moves sand around the port, but I think it's important to point out that the Canaveral Port Authority, in partnership with the Army Corps, they move sand around the inlet to make sure all the sand trapped on the north side gets dumped around, and that's a significant benefit to the beaches south of the port. Then the North Reach is the next one down. It's the oldest shore protection project. It was first nourished in 2000. It's about 10 miles long, and it's all of Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach. It's a big project and it's matured. So you'll notice on here, it says the hurricane repair doesn't start until December of 24. That's because the North Reach, after the 2022 hurricanes, it wasn't in as dire a circumstance as some of the beaches further south. So the Army Corps, with our acceptance, sort of put that one on the back burner because they only had enough time to do so much work in, a given year. The Air Force Base, or now Space Force Base, they put sand on their beach on their own. We don't do that, but the Air Force does use beach nourishment, as the county does, to protect their shoreline. The mid-reach, which I'll get into a little more detail on the mid-reach later, but that's about 8 miles of shoreline. Hurricane repair after the 2022 hurricanes started in November of 2023, or really more properly closer to the end of the year. It's underway now, and it's going to take until a year from now to finish. And the South Reach, which is Indian Atlantic and Melbourne Beach, it's being built under the same contract and same contractor with the mid-reach. The Corps put them together to try to gain cost efficiency. And the South Beaches is the southern 14 miles of the county. It's also known as the Archie Carr National Wildlife Refuge, exists down there. So it's a largely developed shoreline, but the development is less intense. And in that area, the county since 2005 has done dune maintenance projects. They're not as big as the beach projects further north, but they have helped us maintain a healthy dune line to protect the public beach and turtle nesting habitat, as well as the upland properties. The numbers on here are important. If you look at the mid-reach, what the Army Corps is spending in the next 2 years, it's on the order of $38 million to maintain that shoreline. It's a big number. The 2022 storms were the worst erosion we've seen since 2004. So it's more than the average repair job, but it's just the scale of these projects is large, and the cost reflects that. It's important to remember, though, that beach-related tourism, every year, the economic impact of Brevard County is measured in the billions, not the millions. So it sort of justifies our taking care of the beaches. The South Reach, again, being built in combination with the mid-reach, that's about an $8 million project. It's half the length of the mid-reach. And the South Beaches, our engineered dune project, that's on the order of $26 million. The sand placement for that was just completed last month, and we'll do some dune vegetation, the final wrap up next year. So those are the projects north to south. You can't really see this, and all I wanted you to see was the yellow. And I'll give you a hint. At the bottom right, it says in the last 20 years, we've spent over $300 million. And the smaller number in yellow on the bottom is the TDC share, which is about 8% of the total. And we've worked really hard to get federal money, emergency money, any money we can find it. But to get the money, we have to have money in our coffers to pay and then get reimbursed. Or the federal projects, we pay, on a normal year, we pay 25% of a project's cost. We pay about 50% and typically get on the order of half of that 50% back from the state. So the costs are huge, but we leverage a lot of other money. So the TDC, historically, we've gotten lucky, and we've paid less than 10%, but the standard cost share we would expect to pay is about 25%. This is why we do it. Cocoa Beach at the top in 1995. The blue line is the water line that day, right up by the rocks. And that's the same spot at the bottom after we built the beach. For those of you who, it's easy to forget what Cocoa Beach looked like when the beach wasn't really there. It was all seawalls. This is Melbourne Beach. the Breakers condo. The left shot is the Breakers before the project, when they were about to lose the building. And then we built a project in 2001. The middle one is in 2010. We gave Mother Nature the sand and a dune developed. And the one on the bottom right, that's after Hurricane Ian and Nicole. So even after a good swat by a couple of tropical events, the project is still in place doing its job. And it's not just about protecting the condos, it's if you're a tourist or a turtle, what would you rather see? The picture on the right or the picture on the left? So it's not, it's good to protect the tax base as well, but it really, in my eyes, it's about maintaining the beach for locals and tourists and wildlife alike. Here's another one of Cocoa Beach. The top is before the project. The waves washed right up to the bottom of the pier. The volleyball courts would have been in the shore break in that 2000 picture before the project. And the other three are just over the years to show the project doesn't just wash away. We maintain it, but we've maintained that beach over the years. Now I've highlighted Midreach here. You might know the Midreach was a little contentious or concerning because the Midreach has nearshore rock reef habitat, and the county has worked really hard with the Army Corps and the regulatory agencies to develop a project to minimize impact of those nearshore rock reefs. And we've been successful, and I'll take you through. Those are the rocks we're talking about. And this photo was 2 years after our initial renourishment. So 2 years after we built it, the rocks are there, people are fishing on them, all is well. But our permits did allow some impact to the rocks. Up to 3 acres of the rocks might be buried by sand we place. That's less than 10% of the rocks, but we mitigated for it. And how do we, this is a picture of the nearshore hard bottom, and this is last year, summer of 23, and this just says the biological coverage on the natural rocks is still really good. So we've lived up to our end of the bargain to not overly impact. The quote is from a biological study where the biologists say the biological cover on the rocks has actually increased a little bit between before and after. We can't take credit for that, but clearly we didn't, overly impact the rocks. This is about the quantity of rocks exposed after our initial nourishment. And we study every year, we survey rock exposure. And after surveying rock exposure for over 15 years, we can say with confidence, after we nourish the project, there's just as much, or even in this case, a fraction more rock exposed 3 years after our nourishment than before it. And that's important because we promised to do that and we've lived up to our end of the deal. Those are the rocks we're trying to protect. These are the reefs we mitigated with, and we've spent a lot of money on these reefs with Army Corps partnership. There's 10 sites between Satellite Beach and Canova Beach Park, just south of Indian Harbor. This is stuff living on the reef. A sea turtle there is tucked into the nook. And believe it or not, we sat down at a table with a sea turtle biologist 15 years ago and said, here's our plan. And she said, well, it would be really great if you made a notch big enough that juvenile green turtles could snuggle in. So we said, okay, we did. The turtles like it. And the research and the turtles really like it. Every time you go there, you find turtles, and even juvenile loggerhead turtles that were never spotted here before also like this reef. So it's, you spend all that money, I'm really happy when it worked as we hoped. Here's some more stuff living on the reef, and the biologist's statement that the artificial reef deployments have met their goals. That was pulled straight out of a biological monitoring report by marine biologists. There's the fish, 29 species of fish they've documented. Those are the ones that taste good. A lot of local fishermen go out and catch sheep's head. couple shots of the turtles enjoying that reef. So again, we built it for a purpose. It worked. And that's good. We're required regulatorily to do it, but it's also, you know, you hate to spend all that money and have it fail. So victory. Yes. Or
I really, really am glad to see all those pictures, you know, because you're under the gun right now. Why can't we build more reefs like that? It would help with the fishing, it would help with everything. It would help calm down the people that are upset about the mid-reach restoration work that's going on now.
because the ones we built cost $13 million. It's not cheap. That's the
okay.
gist of it.
Okay.
Some of the whole said there was an endless supply of money. We could get a permit, but we built what's required by the permit. And so they were built for mitigation, not just to enhance fishing, and they're expensive. So it's really a financial matter. But the county does get grants for fishing reefs offshore for artificial reefs to promote fishing. We do that, but in a smaller scale. These are quite expensive to build because they're just outside the wave break. It's not easy to work there. Yes,
Did they do anything to help mitigate the wave energy that's crashing into the shoreline, or are they too much of a low relief?
they're low relief, and in fact, the state required that we did models that they would not affect the wave energy reaching the beach. Because even though you think you want to affect the waves, if you do that, then you stop wave transport and you help one area with sand and hurt another area. So they were specifically designed not to break wave energy. So this is the mid-reach. This is how we build it. You might say, why in the world do you build it with trucks? It's because with trucks, you can put on a small dose of sand and not bury the rocks. We promised not overly impact the rocks. The big dredge projects, you can't put a little bit of sand on the beach with the dredge. You can only put a lot. So that's why we put the sand on the beach with trucks. It takes a little longer, it creates a little traffic on A1A, but it's the only way to put it on in small doses. This is after Nicole, this is why we needed it. And again, it's not just about the building, but it's about maintaining a public beach east of the building. And it really shows that 2022 hurricane season walloped the mid-reach shoreline. This is further north in the mid-reach. So you know, if anyone asks you, do we really need it? Is there any need? This shows the need, and it's not, as I said, it's not just about protecting the upland property, but it's about maintaining a beach and protecting the beach from the effects of those nearby upland properties. This is in Shell Street, and at the bottom right, you see some lumps of concrete on the beach. We removed a lot of concrete from the beach before initial nourishment, and the permits require any rubble. You can't bury junk when you nourish a beach. So when we first built it 4 years ago, we did that, but the hurricanes dug in so deep, they exposed some more rubble. And not sure why I've got. So I'll come back to that in a moment, but this is the mid-reach. We put the sand in a pile, put it in the dump trucks. That's the finished product from about a week ago in unincorporated Satellite Beach, just south of the Pineda Causeway. So that's what we're building. And if you split your eyes and look at the sort of top right end of the beach, you can see some exposed black stuff in the surface. That's rock. So we built a dune above it. Some of the sand will eventually sprinkle out there on the rocks during storms, but you can actually see the nearshore rock. We didn't directly bury it. We built the high side, we rebuilt the dune. This is the rubble removal in 2019, and it was required by permit. It's also just the right thing to do because no one wants to stub their toe on that junk. So we removed a lot in 2019, but then this is a couple of weeks ago. The storm exposed some and we went out and got some more, 8 of those big dumpsters full of old pilings, concrete, geotextile. And it's required by the permit. We're funding it as part of our mid-range expenses. Frankly, the debris removal was a modest cost, and it was just good to let all that junk off the beach. It's not good for toads, and it's not good for turtles, and it's an obligation to take it off by the permit. But the South Beaches is the last one that the TDC, with your support, has spent a lot of money on. It's the southern 14 miles of the county. Here's why we did it there, and look, $26 million is the cost. We built it over the last 2 years, so the sand placement is complete. We expect to get 87.5% of that back from FEMA and the state. So it's an expensive project, but when you knock it down to, the local share only being 12%, it gets our costs down to 3 million-ish. Still a lot of money, but it allows us having the money to build it up front, allowed us to leverage the FEMA reimbursement. Here's a hotel down there. The pool was removed, but the hotel's still there. That house has since gone away. So, with regulations and responsible property owners, some buildings that have been there too long and are just too close are backing up, but we're still trying to maintain a beach east of them. And this is the finished product down there. You bring it in with dump trucks, you spread it out with excavators, and the bottom right sort of shows a nice smooth dune template that will host a turtle nest, and next year we'll plant it with dune vegetation. Important to note that in the summer of 2023, the Carr Refuge smashed the all-time green turtle nesting record. Green turtles nest on the dune. They don't nest out on the flat beach. They go to the hill. So we broke a record when we had put sand on 3/4 of the shoreline down there. So it really shows that we strive to get good sand so it makes good habitat for nesting sea turtles. And we can brag about Brevard remaining a highlight as far as turtle nesting. And that's sort of a finished product of the South Beaches. This was a few years ago before the 2022 storm walloped it. But once we plant it and give it a couple of years to grow in, it'll look like this. Good for visitors, good for all of us. That's it for me.
Any questions about beef? Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
We're lucky to have you.
Yeah, it's worth- Okay, now we'll move to you, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's a great segue for my section, which is just, I'm gonna give a little bit of a background and history on a few things, and then talk some numbers, and then share a little bit about some of the contracts that we have under the beach fund. But if you go back 2018, it was decided to create a fund within the beach fund that would fund Indian River Lagoon type grants for projects that would basically be too small for the sorrel program to handle, but might be a program where they might do some testing, and then if it worked, then they could take it to sorrel and get a bigger funding from that. And that was $1 million fund, and so it was decided to put that $1 million into the beach fund on basically a permanent basis, if you will. And since that time, we've had a lot of different things happen. In 2019, we had a grant program. We didn't use all the $1 million in 2020. That was the COVID year. We didn't use all the grant program money. 21, we did use. We actually used $1 million. We got to $1 million. And then in 22, as Mike mentioned, we had a couple of storms hit, and it basically wiped out our beach fund. We actually used every dollar that was in there, anything that was in reserve. And we were still short. We needed 20, I think it was originally 24 million, ended up being 26. We ended up having to borrow funds from the county from their ARPA funds that they had received back from COVID days. And that still has to get repaid when we get our money back from FEMA. But, you know, that was sort of a lesson learned. And, you know, when you listen to people who've been around the county for a long time saying, you know, it's not a question of if we get a storm, it's when. We got 2 storms that year and it caused a lot of damage, particularly to the south. When that fund got wiped out, we were, you know, obviously sort of opened our eyes that it doesn't take much to empty that fund out, even with $15-16 million in there, to take it to zero. And you can see these projects are very expensive projects. So, you know, 38 million, 18 million, 26 million. I mean, those are some big numbers. So what happened after that, Mike started working with the Army Corps, trying to figure out how we were going to do the mid-reach project. And we heard rumblings that the Army Corps was trying to find their own emergency funds that they could use because of the storms that happened to help with that project, because it was going to look like it was going to be a much bigger project than it was originally intended. We were slated to match their funds somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range. So that would have happened basically in 23. And what ultimately happened was the Army Corps did in fact come up with some emergency funds, and they told us that they were not going to be asking for a match from us for that whole mid-reach, south reach project. So that was great news. And those funds that amounted to about $8 million that we were able to put back into our, I won't say put back into, we were able to leave in our operational beach fund and not have to pay them for our match. So we now have $8 million that's unencumbered and not designated for any projects. So that's the good news. And then further, as Mike alluded to, that project down in the South Beaches, we're going to get, you know, close to, as you said, 87.5% back from FEMA. And then the state of Florida gave us a grant of about $3 million for that. So we're getting, you know, we're going to get all of that much back. Probably of the 26, it'll be, you know, in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 that we'll get back in 2 to 3 years. FEMA takes a while to get reimbursements from them, but in the 2 to 3 year window, which will be good because we'll probably need that money for the next big project to happen, because these projects happen about every 4 years. And then, of course, it doesn't account for, you know, if we do get storms between now and then, you know, we'd have to tap the $8 million I mentioned, plus any future money that we get. So the beach, just so you know, PDT is budgeted this year for 27 million. 25% of that is designated for beach. So it's about just a little over 6.5 million that goes into that fund. It will go into the fund this year, and then of course in future years. So it's, you know, an interesting juggling act that we have to do, because when we have to have, with the contracts that we have with the Army Corps, we have to pony the money up when they ask us for it. If they don't, then if we don't, it could void the contract, and we don't want that. So these are like 50-year contracts. So some of you have been on this committee a while, have heard about the 50-year plan. Well, the 50-year plan is, you know, there's no way to do a 50-year plan, honestly. Realistically, what you have to do is just show from a budgetary perspective that we will be able to meet their obligations anytime that they come and ask us for money. So that's what the 50-year plan is. So we're working, you know, the 50-year plan got completely blown up last year because of the storms and the emptying of that fund out. Now we've got money back in that fund, so we'll go back and we'll kind of work through the 50-year plan, if you will, and see how that looks going forward. I've done a few drafts. Mike's taken a look at it. The big thing that Mike's probably gonna tell me, and I think he's already kind of shared with me, is construction costs have gone, elevated quite a bit since 4 or 5 years ago. So we're gonna have to change some of those future projections on future projects. So I'll be kind of curious to see what that does to the plan. But, the goal of the plan is just to always show that we have funds available and we'll always be in the black and able to answer the call if Army Corps comes to us. So that's the idea of that fund. I will tell you for next year, as long as we don't have any major storms hit us, this hurricane season, which they're saying it's going to be a pretty active season. But if we don't get any hits that negatively impact us, we'll have the 8 million that I mentioned. And then we'll probably have about another 5 or 6 million added to the budget next year with 24-25 fiscal year budget. We're just starting the budgeting process, so we're not close to really having all the final numbers in. But just looking at just some future projections, it looks like we'll have 5 or 6 million in addition. And then there are annual obligations, and we'll kind of get into the next section here. But we have annual obligations. So some of the annual obligations include turtle nesting monitoring. So if we've done any projects, we've got to continue to monitor turtle nests, and we use third parties to do that, UCF and some other organizations that do turtle monitoring for us. Planting, if we have needs for planting, like Mike mentioned, we'll need to pay for that. So there's some things that we do pay 100% of, and those are kind of year in, year out kinds of expenses. Other things that we pay for Mike and his team, his budget. It's about $250,000. We also, a couple of years ago, were granted ownership of Lori Wilson Park. Those of you who were around back then know the story behind that. The idea was we were going to put a lot of money into completely redoing that park, and so they wanted the tourism office to kind of manage it so that we could have access and do whatever we needed to do in there. We've since spent $4 million in that park, replacing all the crossovers. There's 7 crossovers. They've all been replaced with a new 30-year composite material. All the boardwalks that run parallel to the park, new bathrooms. In the hammock, we've removed all the invasives and rebuilt the wooden boardwalk. We did it with wood, 20-year pressure treated wood. So we replaced it's about almost a half mile. Say it's probably somewhere between a quarter and a half a mile of wood in there. So it's beautiful. If you haven't been to the park, it's really nice. We redid the whole dog park. We've done a lot of the fencing. It's all new, new showers, all those types of things. So it's great, but there's a annual maintenance of that. It's about about $250,000 that goes to the Parks Department for maintaining that. So that's a recurring charge that we have. And then there's a few other things. So a few years ago, the Hubs Research Institute, SeaWorld Research Institute, came to the committee and asked for some funding to do analysis of what happens if there are sick or dying dolphins or other marine life, large marine life like that. And it's basically for $25,000 a year. They prepare a quarterly report for us that analyzes, basically what they've seen, what happened, when there's a sick or injured or dead dolphin or some other kind of marine life. Sometimes whales will wash up. They'll do the all the things that they need to do to test why it possibly died, and they again prepare a pretty detailed report for us every quarter. So that contract runs through, I believe next year is the last year, so I think November of 25. So at some point we may be coming back to this committee in the future to ask about upping with that, but it's been a good relationship with them, and I think it provides a lot of information for them and for others who are interested in that kind of detail.
What was the
25,000 a year. Yep. Then, and I mentioned the Lori Wilson, so that's on here, that's number 2. So number 3, a couple of things. First of all, thanks to John for joining us. John, Nico is the new director of Keep of Our Beautiful. I don't know, John, if you want to just say hello and introduce yourself and where you come from and all of that, and then we'll talk a little bit about some funding that we provide you guys.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for having me here today. As Peter mentioned, I'm John Nico, and I'm the new incoming executive director for Keep of Our Beautiful. I recently moved to the Space Coast area about 2 years ago, and I actually started out at the Kennedy Space Center working in their education and public programs. That short stint, I came over here to Keep of Our Beautiful. But in the past, I've worked for cities like Winter Park in Orlando in sustainable planning. So I'm bringing these skills to the organization here in Brevard. I've worked with Keep Winter Park Beautiful and Keep Orlando Beautiful in the past, so familiar with the organization and its efforts that it makes on the environment. And this is a very active affiliate here in the state of Florida. I've attended national conferences so far, and this is really a highlight for the organization nationwide here in Brevard County. So I hope to uphold the reputation it keeps and to get to know all of you and work together and keeping this area clean. So thank you.
Appreciate it. And so there's 2 kind of pieces to the relationship that this committee and the Beach Fund have with John's organization. The first one is as part of the IRL grant program a number of years ago, KBB came and applied for a grant. It was decided, basically it was, keeping all the causeways clean, which obviously microplastics getting into the river and into the environment are a huge issue these days. And so between the tourism impact that was felt that track could potentially have and negative impacts that it would have, and then of course the microplastics issue, it was awarded a grant, and then this committee decided to go ahead and grant it as a multi-year award. And so we signed a multi-year agreement. That multi-year agreement is actually up this September. So it was a 3-2 contract, 3 years with a 2-year renewal. We did the renewal, and now that contract's going to be up in September. And that's directly with KBB, and my mind is blanking on the exact number of that. I think it's like 60,000. So that's with the 2. Is that just the one? That's the one multi-year, right? And then what happened 2 years? We didn't have IRL grants last year, but the year before, they asked for a supplemental grant because after COVID, everybody discovered the 528 Causeway and figured out that they could park there for free and have a great time and not have to, be around other people. Well, there was a big trash problem that was happening on the Causeway. And so KBB asked for some extra funding. And so they applied for a 1-year grant for that, or actually was it 1 year or 2 year? It was a 1 year grant for that. And so that was 40,000. And that obviously expires this year because of the grant expiration. So those are 2. And then the third relationship is through the city of Cocoa Beach. Again, going back in history, the city of Cocoa Beach and KBB asked to partner with the TDC to clean the beaches in Cocoa Beach. And that was, obviously it was a big problem, a lot of trash happening with all the tourists there. And so that's $175,000 a year contract. That contract was a 5-year deal, and that is up this September as well. So there's some basically some contractual things that are going to be coming due this year to have some discussion on. Obviously we'll bring that probably over the summer to have some discussions about that. Those are kind of the year in, year out expenses. And then of course the grant program itself, which Angela's gonna
kind of take you through the updated guidelines and things like that, but I think, you know, I would leave it, Madam Chair, to you guys to discuss the idea of the IRL grants. Should they be reinstated this year? If they should be reinstated, they'll go to the TDC and to the board for review. It made sense for us to get the guidelines kind of ready so that you guys could review them in the event that you decide that they should be reinstated. So that's kind of where we are.
Exactly, one comment, just so that everyone is clear. All of the things that we discuss and decide here as a committee, we serve on behalf of the TDC, who serves on behalf of the county commission. So it is up to the county commission and the TDC to take in consideration our recommendation. But ultimately, you know, it is up to them. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And we have this perfect panel of experts around to have these conversations that are really to have. So, Lily, you want to?
Yeah, I had a question about the contract with Natural Resources Management Office. Is that a straight contract for $250,000, or is it contingent on how much bed tax is collected, or is that?
No, it's honestly, there's not even, I'm looking at Mike, I don't believe there's an LOA in place for that. It's just been understood that the CDC will fund their department because of the work that they do and the spending that they do. So, and I believe the amount does fluctuate because, you know, as expenses and you know, salaries and benefits and compensation go up, we have to account for all of that. So do you know, is there an LOA in place on that piece of it?
No, but for decades, there are two of us who work on beaches solely.
Yeah.
And the expense for our two positions is funded by tourism, whether that's my salary or health insurance or my share of the phone bill. But it's just it's the expenses. So every year for the two staff members, myself and Leslie Snyder helped me with grant accounting. Every year in the budget, we budget, you know, how much money does it take to support Leslie and I and our work. And then provide that number to tourism who through some magic transfer in the county budget. But it's been in that same mechanism for, you know, for 15 or more years.
I just wanted to make sure it's protected.
Right. I think it's an understood piece of the budget process. So, yeah.
So we're lifeguards.
Well, I'm trying to go there. Aren't we?
The safe place. Okay,
Public meeting.
yeah. All right, so. I mean, I think we have to have, yeah, I think that this is a good time to have the conversation. So many of you have been around for a while. Some of you that are new, please make sure you're getting your questions answered. If we take this time to do this now, because it does have a tremendous impact on, and I, as your chair, will remind you every single meeting, and I remind everybody that I speak to about this, our sole purpose, our number one purpose for being here is to make sure that those beaches are protected and they're sand on the beach. That is our number one mission, our sole purpose, and to support Mike and his great effort and his very small team that does that. Now, subsequently, you know, the lagoon has gotten a lot of attention, and we know that the health of the lagoon is a huge priority to all of the citizens of Brevard County, so much so that the fact that we proved to tax ourselves on this. So out of that passion for wanting to improve the lagoon came this, the Indian River Lagoon grants. So we've done this before, you know, and it goes to adding money to derelict boats, and the grant process is amazing. And I've had, those of you that had the opportunity to review those grants know that they're very poignant and they're very direct, and the impact is really fast. It's really quite immediate. So last year they decided not to award the grants or just suspend the IRL grants, so we could rebuild that beach fund. I struggle with this at this point because I know how much construction costs are going up. I know how much, you know, we can't predict that there's going to be a storm or not be a storm. And I don't know if any of you saw the footage last year or in 2022. of our neighbors and their beaches making national news or their lack of beaches making national news. And so I sat in my hotel in the middle of the hurricane going, oh, thank goodness that we have done all this work here. So it's not an easy, I don't have the answer, you know, I'm hoping to have this conversation started so that we can discuss that openly and try to make the best recommendation possible to the TDC and then the county commission. So let's discuss. Amongst yourself. Those of you that have been here for a while, I mean, I look at the familiar faces. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it and.
And you mentioned the Sorrel program and taxing ourselves, you know, what's interesting about that, just some facts that I got attending one of their meetings, is the original tax base they thought was going to be about 50 million a year, but that's grown to be like 58 to 60 million a year. So instead of what they thought was originally going to be about $500 million is now closer to 600 million. So, so that, you know, for the 10-year window that they approved it. So they're getting more funds than what they had originally anticipated at the beginning of that program.
And my first question when I started doing this a few years ago was, well, that's a big pile of money. Why do they need our beach money? But these grants don't necessarily qualify for those Sorrel grants. So if it's a niche that is not covered at that point. Yes.
So I like what you said, because it's really kind of like an experiment we're doing at this level to see what works, you know, or maybe what doesn't work too, because you learn regardless. But, you know, if we didn't do it last year, but the year before, we had more applicants and demands and requests for money than we were able to parse out to everybody. So we actually had to have some winners and losers. Now, I don't know, with a down year last year, you know, we might regain some momentum to get the word out if we go forward with this. But there's a demand, there's a need in the community for this program. And I do hope it continues.
Yeah.
As someone who sits on the Sorrel too, you know, we, like you said, you know, I think about 30% of the money comes from tourists, from the sales tax.
Right.
So, you know, it's been so successful in the projects that Virginia's team has put in place. They're working.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw Mike's hand, so.
You did, but Laura Lee is more important than me. She was raising her hand too.
Go ahead, Laura Lee.
I would not say that I'm more important than Mike. I cannot do what you do, Mike. So I know that taking a break was kind of a welcome thing to help your staff get caught up on the grants and let everybody, are we caught up now? Are the grants that we approved 2 years ago, are they pretty much finished now, or some of them needing more time for extensions?
I'll let Angela speak with that. We're not gonna be granting any extensions or seeking to get extensions granted at this point for projects that started 2 years ago, but we did have a number of them say that they needed 2 years. And we've even put in the guidelines now, that these are 2-year projects, not 1-year projects. Because a lot of them just can't happen in 1 year, just realistically.
Line to approve is very challenged. So
Right.
administratively, there's a challenge for them. So what do we have left?
So the grants that were given in 22-23 that were extended through now to 24, there were 11 of them. KBB finished theirs in 1 year. And then the other 10 are all in progress right now and are on track to finish by September here of 24. The only one that may need more time is the Titusville Causeway because of permitting. But everybody else that I've talked to is absolutely on schedule to finish this year.
So to follow up, does that mean that we're gonna maybe look at opening the grant cycle every 2 years instead of every year?
We can discuss that.
Yeah,
I mean, that can be a recommendation that comes out of this committee and as going through the process 2 years ago, I think that is something that we absolutely should consider. Is giving them the right amount of time to complete it, giving us the right amount of time to administrate it, giving staff the right amount of time.
Yeah.
It appears that as the experiment goes, and it just so happens that I was the chair. Not last year, the year before. So went through that whole process, and that was one of the things that came across, and some of you were there as well. That was in this great experiment, that was something that came across as a possibility that I thought might be a better solution. Hunter, you were here.
I am.
You were here before. And Tom, do you guys have any thoughts on this or?
Well, of the ones that are still out there, is there a way that you've been able to assess their success or
Yeah,
non-success, I guess?
just pure communication with them. It seems to have been an amazing year for the clan. The seagrass projects have been successful too. The Satellite Beach has 2 projects, the Adopted Canal and the Sampson Island. Both of those seem to have been successful. There have been some small modifications because of course pricing of some of the items that they put in grants. An aerator, say, like doubled in price, right? And so a few of the grants have made a few small modifications, but as long as they're still achieving the goal that was established in the grant, we worked with them to make sure that obviously that's the number one thing is accomplish the goal that you said you were set out to accomplish. So there have been a few modifications that way. And then as Mike reported for Matt with the derelict vessel removal, he is on schedule to have spent all of the money that you guys granted to him also by September. And he said too, for him, it's so important because there are some boats that just don't qualify for any state or federal funding to be removed. And he said that's where we're so valuable because our money can be used on those boats that doesn't have any other option for.
Can I chime in if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I manage the National Estuary Program grants, and so this is just a comment, and then I have a question. We do 3 up to 3 year grant year extensions, and just because things happen, permitting issues, there's just a lot of things that can happen. So I'm really like the whole 2 year time frame versus 1 year. But one of the big questions I have is what would be a comfortable amount of money in the pot for beach nourishment to where you could be pretty comfortable to say, okay, we can do this program and not have to worry about emptying it at a whim.
What's 56 and 26? 82 million. There you go. That's what we spent. That's what we're spending this year, or somebody's spending it, not necessarily us, but that's the level of the projects from the mid-reach down to the south beaches, which we're responsible for. And unfortunately, we don't have to pay for the north reach because that's under a previous court order that the port has to pay for that. So, but I mean, if we had, a major hurricane hit us and, had damage across the mid-reach all the way down to the south beaches, that's what the cost to repair that beach would be. So, I mean, we'll never have it. I mean, that's not realistic, obviously, to say 80 million. We'll never have 80 million in there. And even in the 50-year plan, I never could get really past like 20 million in the reserve when I was working that plan pretty hard. And now Mike's saying that those costs are all escalating. So, but man, I think if we had 15 or 20 million in the reserve pot, that would help. Obviously we know Army Corps is always willing to try to find emergency funds. FEMA will reimburse us, but that's on usually a 3-year plus sometimes reimbursement basis. So to have 15 or 20 million would help. But I don't know how you get there in the next 5 years anyway, unless we said something like, let's take $1 million from an IRL grant program and just start putting that money into a fund like that, but even then, you'd only have $5 million at the end of 5 years, so that wouldn't get you there either.
And we did previously, before we had the IRL grants, because they started in 2018, all of the 25% of the tax collection was going towards the beach fund. So, we've always tried to keep enough in reserves, because the idea is that if there's a storm, then there usually is FEMA money to help, right? Like, so it's just having that matching dollar to.
Upfront, yeah.
It's expert, am I doing okay?
Yeah.
Mike in the room, it makes me nervous. I explain how the money works. Yeah, Tom.
I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've generally been in that 20-30 million range for beach funds. Would you say in years past? I mean, I think you're good with the 20.
Yeah.
But
I don't think we've been to.
we haven't been to 30, but it's been,
How much do we have now?
between.
We were up around 20, or trying to get to 20, because initial construction of the mid-reach, we were saving up money for a long time to build the mid-reach.
Yeah.
And the initial construction of that, our share of the mitigation reef was $4 million. And so
Right.
we were pretty flush with money until the start of the mid-reach, and then we spent up. And it wasn't purely reserves, it was saved for a known project that we knew was coming.
Yeah. So, the question of how much we have now, we'll have, we'll have the 8 that I mentioned going into next year's budget, and then a little bit more, that probably won't get spent this year, but then some of it's gonna be finishing those 2 projects and things like that. So we might have another, next year, we'll get another 6.5 into it. So I think of that 6.5, maybe about 5 million. So between the 5 and the 8, we'll have somewhere around 13 that's not allocated. Again, we'll crunch, as we get closer into the budget process, we'll crunch numbers a little bit more, but say 12 to 13 million next fiscal year, assuming no impact from storm happen between now and then.
Yes.
So I got a question. So when you say not allocated, so the beach multi-year contracts, and then talking about the vessel removal, how would that be impacted if we went to every other year and with these grants?
Well, on the derelict vessel, Mike can chime in, but it's taken them about 2 years to spend down what we gave them in 22. So they're just gonna finish that last piece of it this year. So, and I don't remember the total amount we gave,
It was 135,000, wasn't it?
146,975.
Okay, so just under 150, so,
It seems to be
Yeah.
a trend, like from previous years too, since we've only been doing this since 2018, that it has always taken
about 2 years.
about 2 years.
Yeah.
What about these beach multi-year contracts? I mean, the
That would be
maintenance.
separate.
Yeah, that would have
That's
to be
gonna
something
be
different.
separate,
Yeah,
yeah.
So
right.
we had a contract, and then they came and asked for a grant as well. So
Okay.
that's where it, to supplement the.
Cause I'm looking at cleaning the beach, Lori Wilson Park, and,
Those are all
Those are-
contracts.
okay, so
those are
those
not part of
contracts would
IRL
not be
grant program.
impacted by
But, yeah, but they do come out of the.
Beach fund.
the fund.
beach, okay.
So. Good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well, I was just thinking, because it was mentioned, if we went to a permanent 2-year kind of program where we were only funding like the beginning of the first year, right? We had grants that people came in and request dollar amounts.
mhm,
That was spending the first million. If you went to 2 years and to save the second million,
mhm.
then over time you would be able to put that into the beach. I'm thinking,
That's what I thought of when I imagined it that way. I mean, that's the way I would think of it is that.
you'd
you're
have 2
gonna be-
years to spend $1 million, but you'd actually end up with 2 million, so you'd have an extra $1 million in there. Is that what you're?
Right.
Right, so 1 million every year, so 1 million would go possibly into reserve. And then 1 million would go to the IRL grants, and then not only does it, you know, in my mind, fix both or help both things, but it also just makes sense administratively, since we've done this great experiment, we've found out that it does take that long to get these things up and going. Yes.
And I think that from this committee's, thought process and recommendation perspective, I don't think you have to make, I think the recommendation you have to decide is, do you want IRL grants this year? And then make that recommendation to TDC. As far as what happens to next year's program, I mean, you certainly along with that recommendation could say, hey, and by the way, our recommendation is just do it every 2 years. You could certainly say that, but I don't think you have to make that today.
Right.
So.
Just because we've seen so much changes happen lately, and some of us that have been around a long time, there have been very drastic changes. This is something that we could put into the guidelines. Every year, the committee has the right or ability to change the guidelines.
Right,
But I would think that hopefully we're trying to create a little bit more continuity, and we're not making something new anymore. In my mind, we're making it better. And so I just kind of, I think I understand the point that the next year, the next committee
Could change it.
could be a different chair.
Yeah,
Up and go.
you could have a whole new TDC. Or you could have the TDC from 3 years ago all come back.
Yeah. So these things change, but hopefully the part about this is that that's why we are a committee, is that there's familiar faces and that wisdom, and we pass on the findings and hopefully continue to make the best decisions and not reinventing the wheel every time.
I will say in the guidelines, if I'm not mistaken, it does allow for 2 years. And then I think it allows the director, me, to grant a 1-year extension, right? So that way, because what was happening is every time we would have to have an extension, we'd have to go back through the whole process again and go all the way up to the board. So this does give a little bit of extra leeway in there, and that was decided last year, but then the board never decided not to vote on having IRL grants. So that was why we didn't have them last year.
It's gonna be.
And I'm just thinking, given the uncertainty of the weather and what this year is gonna be like, I think we should consider maybe setting a minimum amount that we have in the beach fund before we even consider these things. And I'm thinking somewhere around 15 million. And the other thing we're forgetting is that, and Orly alluded to it when Mike was speaking, was how lucky we are to have Mike, because we've been to Tallahassee and we know that this guy gets money before a lot of other places do, because he's had his act together and he's got great relationship with the state people and the feds. And, God forbid anything should happen to you, but I don't know if we get down to,
Do we need
whatever.
insurance policy on that?
12, 13 million, if that money is gonna go as far, if we don't have a certain person at the helm.
I would definitely sleep better with knowing that we can fund these projects in the event of a major weather event. My hotel is inland, I'm not on the barrier island, but I can easily say that if we don't have a beach, I lose visitors as well. So this isn't something that is just the beach hotels, and I've tried to educate, many people on that as well, as it's not just the beach hotels, it's all of us. And not only that, anytime there's something like this that also benefits the residents, I think it's a win-win, right? We all want a beach, and so it's being funded by our tourists is it's a win-win for us as citizens. So it's a very valid point. Did you say something about money coming back though?
That's the 8 million.
But it was 21 to 23 million coming back? You got 3 million in a grant.
Yeah, in 3 years or so, or maybe a little bit less, but approximately 3 years, we should get about 20 million back from FEMA. And then the state of Florida, Mike was able to get a grant from them for part of that South Beaches project, I think about 3 million. So, yeah, we should have that money coming back and,
Like 27?
it'd be like 27, something like that, yeah. So, but in 28 or 20, right around 28, we'll have another huge project to do in the mid-reach. So we're gonna need those funds for that. I mean, it's not like the funds are not gonna get used, but it will, I think it will help shore up the account a little bit, assuming there's not something happening between now and then.
It's
So,
historically 3 to 4 years. It has been happening.
yeah. Yeah,
Has been, so,
right.
any other thoughts or comments? Well, I would like us to come out of this with a recommendation. It will impact how we move forward with the recommendation to the TDC and the county commission. So I don't know how you want to go about this. We looked at two very viable options, well, three, that's the way I look at it. Is we do nothing and we just keep building up the reserve, or we set kind of like what Tom said, a timeline to get to a point where we advise the future committees of kind of where we want to be, or we go in and we do this implemented every other year kind of grant cycle where we're helping both pots. And I think that unless someone can think of another option, that's basically what I've heard today from the committee is those three options. Did I capture that, Paul?
Put in, put an option. Put an option be to just continue the way we have been doing it since the committee's inception.
Oh,
Which is our annual, funding and then annual grant awards.
I did not hear anybody as a proponent to that idea, so if that is something that you want to also consider,
Yeah,
then we can.
I would consider the status quo should be something to be considered.
Oh, yes, I'm looking at the status quo of last year, which was nothing. Considering the most recent status quo,
I got my rose colored glasses on.
no, I understand, I got you, but no, we can absolutely consider that as well. Maybe I have any questions on those options?
There's one other option too. Instead of doing the every other year cycle, you could do reduced amount every year. If you
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to. So like 500 each year instead of $1 million every other year.
That is another option. Thank you for being here.
I'd like to say, I think the IRL grants were really important. And following what Daniel's saying, it should go every year. We'll look at it if their funding is there. I mean, that's always the big if. But I think it should be done because I see it. I'm out on a paddle board around Sampson Island and on the beach surfing and I see it and live it. So I think it's important.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify, so that would be a grant cycle every year for 500,000, but they would be 2-year grants with a 1-year extension.
Right, because the projects do
Right.
take a little bit longer to.
But
to do.
you would be cutting down the amount that you'd be administering
Wording, yeah,
and trying to, for the staff to try to keep track of. Would that be doable for the staff? Yeah.
I think so.
I agree with Hunter. I think that, we're the only TDC in the state, I believe, that is doing anything like trying to fund grants in the estuaries. And I think it's a really nice feather in our cap. And if we can afford it to, the 500,000, I think we should try to go along with it. But I'll leave that up to you guys because you're the ones that are trying to figure out how to build the reserves back up. The $500,000 is a lot. It's a lot less than $1 million.
That is true. I, as long as the staff feels comfortable administering that, I mean, I can tell you that I can still remember every grant that we read from 2 years ago. Every presentation that we saw, the disappointed faces of the people that we denied. Like, it was a lot of people. I mean, there was, oh, well, how many, 20 grants or something approximately that we awarded that year? Yes. I don't know.
So I only started last year where we didn't award anything. So out of those ones that we awarded, how much was on average was each grant awarded?
They varied.
They went from
Big.
50,000 up to 250.
Okay,
Yeah, Natural Resources had a couple of really big projects, and then there was a number of smaller projects, so it was kind of all over.
and do we know how many it was?
Like 11?
There were 11. Yeah,
11.
11.
Seemed like 20.
Well, there were more
You may have
applicants.
reviewed 20
Seems like-
applicants.
Yeah, there
I mean,
there were,
You reviewed 20 applicants and then funded 11.
okay, then.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of discussion.
Oh, boy. I don't want, yeah.
I think the end question is how many were denied?
I want to say like
I think
4 or 5.
So it wasn't overwhelming, we
Yeah.
approved. it.
Right, but they were disappointed.
Yeah.
well, we're gonna have more disappointment if we only have 500.
Right, we're gonna improve.
That's what I'm
14
thinking.
tonight.
I mean, that's what I was curious.
That's
yeah.
kind of where, you know, if that's where in my mind, to give $1 million, it makes sense for those people to spend and do those projects. The biggest thing about this too is that we have a responsibility to communicate to our circles of influence and our people, what the results are. I mean, that was one of the things that you asked right away was, or someone asked, I can't remember, what was where we are with the success rate of this, that we're taking this money, and the biggest challenge the Indian River Lagoon has is people understanding that we're doing a lot of stuff to make it better as a community. And so I think that's our biggest thing. So for me, being able to track that and then being able to have that data and say, you know, when I found out about the derelict boats, I don't know, and none of my friends or anybody else want to hear me talk about derelict boats anymore. I was like, every time I'd be like, there goes another one. So it's with education, right? So I don't know, I think there's a benefit to also waiting and seeing the projects through and then making sure we're sharing that story, because that's the part that I think we're missing the most. And I've heard Dwayne talk about this as well, DeFreeze, about how we need to do a better job communicating that. Okay, you wanted to say?
I did, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm just trying to take it all in. It's my first year. I'm starting after hearing all this conversation. I like the idea of the 1 million every other year going to lagoon grants. I think it helps with the organizations who are applying for these grants too, to understand, okay, in this year cycle, chances are there's not gonna be any funding. So, you know, if you're just doing the kind of half and half every year, then they're putting their dog and pony show all together every year, and there's less money for them to be able to draw from. But if they know, you know, okay, well, it's not gonna be this year, it's gonna be next year, then they'll get the dog and pony show up only every other year, you know. I don't know, I just feel like it sets up more chances for disappointment, because we're giving less funding, and I like that idea though of the million, but of every other year.
Yeah, I think it allows them to fully fund,
Mhm.
because if we do it the halfway, I think we'll give someone $25,000 this year for a project, but they may not get the $25,000 to kind of do whatever they needed to do to take it to the next level, or I don't know, any other thoughts? Thank you.
Intermittent funding over many years is tough for a lot of nonprofits and a lot of organizations to say, okay, we can go after this year, but then there's nothing next year. And if we didn't get that one, then we got to wait a whole 2 years. So having something every year makes a little more sense, just because you have that opportunity the next year instead of having to wait 2 years. Now, granted, it's half, and it's hard. We give out grants every year, and there's always people that are going to be unhappy. We had 350,000 for water quality, and we got over $1.5 million in ask, and so only a couple projects got funded. It's just the nature of how grant process works.
Yeah.
But are we gonna be willing to give out, if you've got so many projects, are we gonna be with half the money? Are we gonna be? pressure to give out smaller one?
Mhm.
Or are you gonna
Yeah.
be go looking for that one, you know, one project that's gonna take up all the money?
Right.
No, I
That's
will
my
say-
concern.
One of the findings that I felt the last time we did this is I felt like we should have put a cap on the grant per applicant, because some of the smaller grants were really good and like had a really direct benefit, but some of those larger grants were really big and almost, I felt like should have been more in the Sorrel program. So I was like trying to figure out and learn how, if this is supposed to be fitting the need of those smaller grants that aren't qualified for Sorrel, but we gave out a couple that were big. I mean, pretty big dollar amounts that I was like, how is that not fitting into that bucket? And I don't know if they would have or not. It was just my thought process afterwards, and the findings that we discussed as a committee was like, maybe we should have a cap on this grant so that it fits that specific one. And I thought your hand.
Yeah, that was one of the things I'm really glad you guys mentioned the cap, because when I read the package and the guidelines, I noticed there was no maximum. And so that's a really good way to guarantee multiple, awardees, is to have a cap.
Yeah. And if someone that needs, $500,000 to do their project, then they know that this is not the right grant for them.
Right.
Right? Like if we set that expectation, then they know that they have to go find another grant that fits their need. Ooh, I forgot about that. That was really good.
I can offer on that point, maybe just for the data, so 7 of the 11 grants were under 50,000. And the 50,000 in the guidelines in that year was set up to where you don't need a map, like, right? Anything over that 50, you need a map. So 7 of the 11 were under 50.
Which kind of functions as a cap in a little way, or is it maybe like?
It didn't though.
It didn't,
It didn't work. I understand, but in my mind, that's what I thought. It didn't, and that's how it happened.
yeah. I would not be opposed to a cap, because the bigger projects, they were getting grant money from multiple sources. And it was mostly the cities and the county that had the big projects. And so, if you put a cap of 50,000 on it, no match required, but they could get bonus points if they had matching money, I think that would be fair. I think that's not gonna kick out the little small projects, and we would end up with a lot of, we have the ability to just, zero in and pick out the very, very best projects that are gonna get us a good bang for our buck. But I think a cap, because of the limitation of how much money we have and the whole vision behind the project when we initially talked about it. Again, it's projects that don't qualify for Sorrel, and I think a cap would be okay.
Yeah, so I'm struggling a little bit with the conversation because we had $1 million for the last few years until last year we didn't have anything. So now we're requesting, we want to have less money because the amount of work from staff, or the money's not there?
No.
Or, because I would say we go with the original.
Okay, so when we take that money, Charlie, then we take the sand money. Okay, so that money, there's not money that's IRL, it all comes out of the sand fund. So we're trying to build up the reserves so that in the event that there is a hurricane between now and 2027, we have matching dollars so that FEMA will come in and do the work. And just like Mike explained, like every $1 we spend, we get back like, was it 8 or 9?
Yeah,
Like it's like a
10 or 11 now with this past year.
See, if we don't have that money in the bank, we don't qualify for any of it. We can't apply for any of those grants. So that's where I started by saying our number one purpose here is, and always will be, that we need to keep sand on the beach. Up in 2018, in the Great Wisdom of the County Commission decided to do this $1 million as the RL grants, which is a great thing to do. The dynamics has changed so much, the storms have changed so much, and the cost of the repairs have cost so much. So we're just trying, as a committee, we're just trying to discuss, how do we do both? Do we want to do both? How can we make this work so that we can make sure we have money for the sand on the beach? And in the event that we have a storm between now and 2027, it's just really hard to say that, like, it's hard to predict next year, right? But, so that's why we're having this discussion, is there a way, you can keep doing it, you can keep doing the $1 million every year. The thing about it is that we're not building up the reserves as quickly, in the event that we have a storm. That's the goal. Does that explain your question?
It does, it just seems a little backwards. In
Were you
that the money should be appropriated by the city county commission and say, here's what you have available. Because it seems like we're, the tails wagging the dog in this case.
Oh, no, we're the ones who
Yeah.
collect the money.
Yeah.
So this is PDT money that we get, that is statute, that 25% of the tourism tax that we collect goes towards the beach fund. So really, I don't know, maybe you can provide some history. I don't know how the IRL grant thing, I wasn't around then, I know you were around then, happened.
Yeah, well, we had money in the reserves when it happened. We hadn't had these storms yet. And so if we pushed for the $1 million every year, you're gonna get shut down by the TDC, first of all. But if it makes it past the TDC, the county commission's gonna shut it down. I think we have a greater chance of success with the $500,000 every year, so that we have a grant program every year. Put a cap on it. We'll end up with 10, $50,000 projects, or maybe, some might only be 25,000, but we would end up with some nice projects, some good PR, and we wouldn't be taking as much money away from building up the reserves for the beach renourishment.
So, Madam Chair, I'm just gonna point
Yeah.
out, we haven't gotten to the actual guidelines yet, and,
But
yeah.
point having guidelines.
Right, but we're not
I
gonna.
think it's the most important thing that we have to decide for the whole year. Like, I hate to throw it on you all in the first meeting. It's out of you.
Welcome to the beach committee.
But this is what sets the tone for what we're going to do. Because honestly, right now, if this committee said we want it all to go into the reserve, but we would be done. We would have one other meeting for the rest of the year. That's our sole purpose. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should do that in any way. I like this idea that we've developed a whole new possibility of continuing this, and I had never even thought of this idea. So that's where I think, having this consensus and this talking is what helps us get to the best idea. That may not fit all the needs, but feels like you want to.
I was just thinking that I've kind of gone back and forth with everything, listening, but I agree with Laura Lee. I think that that's probably the best route, in my opinion, with the 500,000.
And if you do,
cap on
you have the ability to make a motion. And I will entertain that motion.
I'd like to have, Peter, can we do that? I mean, will that impact our ability to do big projects later if we do 500,000 this year and 500,000 next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to what Julie said. I mean, that because this committee turns over every year, it's always a possibility that the next year's committee could do something different. But there's nothing stopping this committee from making a recommendation that it's a $500,000 program this year, and then and then state your recommendation that we would keep it at $500,000 so that we could grow the reserves, and then we see what happens in the future. But
I think I asked the question that you are asking, I believe, is that we do have the money,
Okay,
so we could
Thank you.
afford it. And
okay, yeah, sorry,
That's okay.
I wasn't picking up on
Okay.
on that part of the
I
question.
think that's.
Yeah, we do have, we could, whether it be $500,000 or $1 million, we have, I believe we have enough funds in next year's budget that we would have the ability to cover that.
Remember-
Again, without any storms hitting or whatever. Yeah.
500,002 is separate from the contract. So that's
Right.
in addition to, so don't forget.
So that means those
You
obligations.
still have to look at when the contract's in at the end of the year. So we have a bit of.
And the 500,000 need to be approved by the TDC, the lowering of it. And if it ever wanted to be raised, it would have to be
Yeah.
approved by them.
And not
Yeah.
to forget that then the county commission has to approve it.
Right.
So whatever we make a recommendation of, it could literally get there and they go, "Wah, nope." So, I mean, that we don't want, hopefully, as much time and expertise as we have around the table. I go to the TDC, and bring this to them and share with them how much time that we went over this and the level of expertise and that, we've done our due diligence. And so that usually helps build that confidence and explain that, and then, it goes to the county. So. Did you want to make your motion, or did you? I mean, anybody can make the motion, I just.
Go ahead. Okay, I make the motion that we go 500,000 for the year with a cap at 50,000 per grant.
I'll second that motion.
Oh, great.
Daniel, second?
Daniel,
Okay,
Daniel likes it, that's good.
I think it's a good compromise. I mean, I think it shows that we're being, responsible and thinking about the beaches, but also trying to do the best we can towards, the lagoon.
and any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I'm so proud of you. Now we'll take it down the line and we'll see what happens. So now that opens the door to now we have to make these guidelines. And I would just like to say, I've been on many committees and, I feel like it's very challenging when we try to rewrite the guidelines every year. So there is in this foundation, some really good work that has been done in previous years. So I think, we have to get the verbiage in there, the max grant is 25,000 and how we're going to do the. I told you,
Right.
I gave my due diligence, I'm falling fast as the clock ticks.
And
Okay,
I offer a sidebar too, with
Yes.
the funding. One of the things I think is missing a bit in the SORL funding or is not funded to the proper level is education. And we've done some educational type funding in the group, but that might be a focus of emphasis, or not quite sure what the right term is, but
I would recommend that we save that for next year. Only after, I would hate for us, okay, it was a very contended project, the education piece. I'm thinking specifically of the book. Yeah, okay. I think that right now with limiting the amount of funds, I think we should focus on the actual IRL benefited projects, only because there was a lot of political in. I don't know how to say this. It got a little political with the books.
And
So
then there have
I-
to be books.
No, I
There's
know,
A lot
the
of ways to educate, and some of the signs that came with the projects, they were.
Those were, yes,
Yeah.
that kind of counted as that. Those were included, but like a separate grant for that just has
No, no, I-
education,
Yeah, no,
because
I'm
that's
just,
what we got. That's what sort of muddied the water last time. Like the education pieces that were included in the grant funds that actually had a project, those all were approved and had no issue. Is that what, are you even talking about giving an extra point value or what are you?
no, I'm just thinking it's an area, maybe an area of emphasis. I mean, you guys were all
Oh.
talking about education and getting people to understand the issue of the lagoon and whatever the best vehicle for that. So
Right.
it's a sidebar. It's
No,
something
no, it's really good.
that I feel we could do better in Sorrel, but we're not. Just. You can leave it at that.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
let's start
that's what
going
we need to
through.
do,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can add education in that such as, but not limited to.
Exactly, yeah.
In section 1.0, and I had a question. D and F both say waterway access, so what is the difference between D, waterway destination and access? And improved and sustainable recreational waterway access, and then F, which just says waterway access. What's the logic behind that?
Yeah, you could probably take F out. I agree, it's redundant.
Maybe I can write it
Yeah,
down.
we did, there was a discussion about this waterway access as part of the,
No, it's okay, but how about we just back up just a hair? Great comment, great comment. Let's, if you don't mind, let's start with back on the agenda. We'll start with the checklist and the guidelines, and let's go section by section and discuss those items, and your education will fit in there too. So let's do that. So in your packet, let's just start on page 7. And I think I can walk you through this with your additional comments, but also help with the sections where we want to make the change from the motion. Okay, so let's, page 7 of your packet of 7 of 37 and 8 of 37. This is something new that we are implementing this year. We're doing a really good job of taking all the committees and bringing some similar items to each of the committees, and this is one of the items that we wanted to be similar. Each grant application, as it works its way through the process, all the way to the Board of County Commissioners, will be accompanied by a checklist so that we know how complete the application is and if they've included everything in that application. So the checklist that you're seeing here on page 7 and 8 are internal documents that we are going to use to make sure that grant applications are complete before they go to you for your review.
And then I'll just comment on the second, page 8, that will come to the committee, so the committee can see that staff looked at this, checked everything out, and either found it was, completed or provided, or it wasn't, or if it was provided, but it wasn't complete, we could comment on that and say, we didn't get all of it, or we got a portion of it, but not everything was provided that was asked for. That way the committee can use that in their scoring and in their evaluation, but even beyond the committee, the PDC and the board could then see that, staff was reviewing these things, and those are questions that have come up this last year on some of the grants where, some of the budget information wasn't complete or things like that. And so we just want to make sure we're covering all of that.
I have to say, I love this. I mean, this is fantastic. Because when you're going through and scoring them, you're trying to get all the pieces and make sure that it's all there. So this is really great.
And so this will be right at the beginning of it. And so, the application can only be done online, right? There's no paper forms. It's only an online application.
Yeah.
And so, so I assume that, all of these things are, well, some of it is included in the application, in the online application, and then some of it has to be scanned and attached, yeah. So it says in the same order as the checklist. So the way that the application, the online application is gonna be set up, so you're gonna have you'll have this checklist first, and then the application itself. So the watershed map and the boundary map and the timeline and all of that will follow the application then. Is that, and it's gonna be kind of hopefully set up so that people, it'll say, here's where you add your Indian River Lagoon watershed map. Here's where you add your project boundary map. So.
Yep, exactly. And I tried to make the match. You're making me question now if I got the order right, but on page 37 of 37 in your packet, you're gonna see where those attachments come together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll double check to make sure they are in the right order, since we've been specific about asking for that, right? Exactly right. Yeah, so I'll make sure that they match in order.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, just to be clear about our application system, we use a system that's called Alchemer. It used to be called Survey Gizmo. It started as a survey tool, but then we realized that others were using it beyond just for surveys. You could actually use it for applications of all kinds, including grant applications. But the one thing it doesn't let you do is it doesn't let you place a attachment in a certain position. You have to print the whole application out. So Angela will be sorting those applications after she's printed them out, and she can put them in the right order once we get them in the hard copy format. So,
Great question. So you don't need anything from us on the checklist other than that we like it or any
Yep.
changes?
Yep.
And I like the idea
I
of the
like it.
continuity between the committees because
Yeah.
as a CDC member, it's very hard to even evaluate it when they're all different.
Yeah. So the cultural grants will follow the same form.
yeah, we're trying to not only have them all have, right, so they'll all have the checklist, but they'll also, when you go through the guidelines, every section of the guidelines will be the same for every grant, which in the past has not been the case, so we've done a lot with formatting and consistency.
Okay, so we're moving on to guidelines.
Quick little question. I just want to ask, do they have to have everything in the checklist to be deemed, responsive, or is it, or will like it go to the next phase to be reviewed by us if they're missing something type of thing, or is it, do you deem
It's
them
pretty
non-responsive?
likely, unless they're just don't provide anything, that we're gonna send it to the committee and not, we're not gonna. What we don't want is we don't want staff being the ones to kill a grant application. Unless they're really remiss in not providing enough information, and then we would tell the committee that, and then the committee could decide if they wanted to adhere to that or not, but I would defer to the committee on that, and if they don't want to score something because they feel like it's very, deficient, then that's okay, but we don't want staff to necessarily be in that position, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, Lori?
Yeah, typically when I rank in a grant and you have a list like this, if somebody has left something out, I ding them.
Yeah,
I
of course.
take off points.
Yeah, yeah, it could be dealt with in the scoring process. We just don't want
Yeah.
staff to necessarily be the ones to.
Well, and also on there's a comment section that gives us the ability to provide you with, if something was not provided,
Why?
it was not provided. So
Okay.
it could be
Yeah.
out of just, they didn't want to give it to us, or, sorry, I was in Chicago until 2:30 in the morning last night. No, just seriously, it's just giving the applicant the ability to provide you with a reasonable reason why something wasn't provided.
For being in Chicago.
All right, I understand. We're a little bit more rigid at the NEP. They gotta hit their 6 things, and if they don't, then, I make that decision, but, that's cool. We can do it this way too.
I would say that I've received feedback, and I mean, it's very clear, that the county commission is directing us to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. Like, that's the biggest thing, is like, we want to make sure we're looking like, I know we do a lot of work. The folks that have done the process, and it's a lot of work, but we want to make sure that we are identifying it and having that discussion if something is missing. That's my ask.
Yeah,
Is that we haven't always had the ability to have a discussion as to why something was missing.
You put that in a clause that says, if you don't have one of these, attach the next, in place of
It
that.
could impact your total point.
No, if you don't have this, say, Project Tomway with milestones done, and you don't have that in replacement, tell us why you don't have it.
I don't know.
I think it's on the form, which now I've, it's like the page. Yep, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, on page 8. So this is the one there, the applicant is gonna fill out, and see how it says,
Right, it is like,
oh, that is you're right, okay.
yeah, we would ask them that
Yeah,
question to get the why.
The staff would work on making sure if something wasn't there, to contact them and make sure that they know they didn't include that and to ask them why. So that's where the staff helps. But what happened was in a disconnect, at least in my perspective in years past, was that the staff did that work. But we didn't always, as a committee, understand that something was missing. Because if we didn't have a checklist to look at and go, this is very clearly missing a budget, whatever that was missing. So I think I think this fixes it in my mind. But it is a great experiment, as I said.
And the two pieces that I think have been the biggest that have come up with, particularly with the board, are budgets are super important to have them right. And then in the capital grants, they're supposed to provide an economic impact study, and There's been a lot of questions about what that is and what that looks like, and is it complete if they
Yeah.
don't do exactly what, you know. So,
So our work is being questioned, and so that's where we just wanna make sure that we have everything and it's there, and I think the checklist fixes that.
I
Does
like
that
the
answer your
checklist.
question? Okay.
Well, it's not a question, it's a suggestion that obviously you have this list, and if for some reason
Yeah.
the applicant can't provide that, they should provide an explanation why they didn't.
They
So
will,
that- oh,
they will, that's exactly what we're saying.
There's
That
on
is
the next page.
exactly what will happen
List
is
of it, so that you don't have it.
the
So
trigger
the
will be-
comment, in the comment section,
Right.
tell us why this is.
and that's exactly what will happen.
Yeah.
Okay,
As
so,
staff will make sure we have that for any item that's missed.
and then,
So this is a thing for the staff, so they'll go down the list, and if this is missing, they're gonna contact the applicant and find out, and then write in this column here why that was missing.
Okay, I'm putting the impetus on the applicant.
no, and you can do that, but what's happened in years past is somebody has to check it and make sure, because the applicant may not know that they missed something. So that's where the checks and balances come in, is that Angela's gonna go through and get all the documents, put it all together, gonna go through her checklist, and if something's missing, she's gonna reach out to the applicant and say, so, but sometimes maybe it didn't get uploaded right, or technology glitch, or, you know, there's many reasons why. something- Yeah, so then they can have the opportunity to send it before it comes back to us, or give a reason, so that's great.
I'd be careful with taking stuff after a deadline if they missed it. You could get into legal issues there. So just be careful. If you contact him, say, hey, you missing this, we can't take it after this timeline, but if you can tell us why, we can at least input that, but I would not take anything after a deadline.
We've never taken anything after the deadline, and I think, you know, what we would always encourage, and certainly will encourage, is that they get things in early. They don't wait till 5 o'clock on the day of the deadline, because then there is no recovery from that.
Right.
Then we won't,
Yeah.
we won't accept items after 5, on that day, but if they turn it in the day before and we see that it's missing, then they have the opportunity to correct that or add something or whatever. The other.
Yeah, I offer that too.
Yeah, and then the other thing might be, there might be a question about something that we might accept. It's not turning something in after 5, it's just giving further clarification of something that we might accept, but that would be about it.
Okay, just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess parts my procedural question. So as they get submitted, then staff reviews them as they come in, like real time, instead of waiting until after the deadline.
Yeah.
So then you can catch something like that.
Thank you.
We get 50 at 5 to 5.
Yeah, right. Oh, I know. I
Right,
do
yeah, I
this.
know, right?
Okay, so everyone's covered, we're gonna move to the.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so on the guidelines, you start on page 10, and Laura Lee, you noted 2 of the changes that were added here. One was waterway access, which is redundant, and we can take that F out. And then we've also added increased tourism activity to the grant projects. And this is where I feel that if you did want to add education, this would be the area in which we would add it.
I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, because it looks like though, everything up there is quantitative.
Yeah,
And the education would be more of a qualitative measure, which obviously is a little bit more difficult to assess.
yes.
You could do like pre and post assessment learning tests. It's kind of the only way to quantify education. And we see that with some of our small grants, but it's a lot harder. You're definitely doing apples and oranges versus what you have here.
I think it might be something for us to add on our next go around and how we figure that out, just because of the sensitivity we have right now based on these programs and the political environment we have. I just know we had so much scrutiny over the project that was, I just don't want to see the whole thing get derailed for a children's book. Again, we cannot do that. And if you had a different chair here, they, unfortunately, you have the knowledge and experience of the last time we did this. I just would ask that we just stick to the quantitative with this current round and see how we do and see how we can improve that portion of it as we go through the process. And maybe look at it as in the grant process, maybe they can get a bonus point or something, like, I don't know how we would do that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I think it's important, and I think it's a really important thing. I just, with it not being as quantitative or easily quantitative, then right now it's just not recommended.
No, I understand. I
Okay.
understand the problem.
Thank you.
So my recommendation is we go, there aren't that many changes. You may propose more changes, but maybe we go through the entire guidelines and then make a motion at the end. If that's okay. Okay, all right, good. So, those of you who were on the board last year, of course, the areas that, haven't been edited at all were items that we discussed last year. And we made some big changes last year by involving the, attorney's office because the, guidelines serve as a partial contract. So when we go to contract with these grants, it's simply a 2-page contract and they refer back to these guidelines. So that's why they are more robust than say 3 years ago. So on page 12 of 37, you're going to see all those dates have been updated. The one thing you want to note is probably the bottom date, the FY 2024-26 project completion date. So this is where this would be a 2-year grant, as written, and with Peter's explanation of the ability to make it a 3-year grant, with a 1-year extension granted by him.
So wait, we have to go through this timeline because I have questions. Okay, so if it goes through the TDC and then it goes to county commission, the application would open on the 24th of April.
Yeah, and so
And
it would go to the TDC next week. And then the board is gonna go to the second board meeting in April. And so the 24th is after that second board meeting, so that's why the application opens. Now, if the board, for some reason, decided either not to take action or to defer action or something like that, we'd have to redo the timeline, but other than that, assuming that they approve it, then.
And this is 3 weeks of a grant that we haven't had in 2 years. So my question, I feel like 4 weeks is.
It's very, very tight.
Yeah. I really feel like a month in past years has always been the thing, and like what Charlie, you said that, we have to get people educated that we're doing it again. Like that grant applications have to know that we're doing this again, and so I just kind of worry that that's not enough time. So if we were to make it a month, what does that do to us? I just think we need wiggle room because the board also could take no action.
So I think, let me offer this too. We set the application date and then we look at wanting to start the grants on October 1st of 2024, which is the second line from the bottom. And then we squeeze everything in between there. So what I would offer is, since this is going to be a 2-year grant, maybe instead of, we give everybody a little more time in the schedule, instead of starting on October 1, we start on November or December.
Oh, I like that.
You know what I mean? We have to end up pushing it because they do have 2 years to complete it. If we give them a little more time, we may get more quality applications.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even think you have to technically say, the only reason it starts on October 1st is because that's when our fiscal year begins in 24. They can start it whenever they want to start it. The question is, if we add a week there, and that's all we're adding, I don't see a problem with that. If there's more time that we need to add for, let's say, committee review or things like that, then it might push it a little bit past that October 1st time, just because it takes a while to execute the contract. But I mean, I'm not concerned about just adding a week in there, making it, instead of 5/15, making it 5/22 or whatever.
And keeping the completion date the same.
Yeah, I think so.
So you want the application to close on 5/24?
What day, are you looking at your calendar?
I'm looking at what I know is the TDC date and the BCC date. I just have a picture.
5/24 is a Friday. But the
Hang
TDC,
on a second, 5/24 would be a Friday, yeah.
but the TDC meeting's on the 22nd? Is that what you said?
No,
No, we have to
No,
go to-
our push point there is actually our second meeting for the group, which we were gonna meet on 5/21, but we could meet the following week then too for this meeting.
But we don't have any meetings in June.
Right.
So the next TDC meeting after 5/24 is going to be July 24. And then the next available BCC meeting, as we have kind of looked at it, would be August 27th.
which
But that-
should be fine.
Yeah, that doesn't affect that.
Okay,
Yeah.
just make sure everybody understands.
Yeah.
where-
Okay, so we would just be moving the meeting date to the 29th for presentation? Is that when the grant applicants would come and give presentations on the
Yeah.
29th?
For the either 28th or 29th, whatever.
That is the
For everyone?
Wednesday before a holiday weekend. Is everybody available? I mean,
It's the Wednesday after a holiday.
after, sorry.
Yeah, Memorial Day the 27th, and then it'll be Wednesday the 29th.
You should be back to work by then. For those of you that don't work, can schedule around.
For those of you who are working, you always work on Mondays, it's the industry that we're in.
Yeah, that's why I have to ask the question because I'll be working, but, okay, so we're good with this? Is everyone comfortable with this timeline?
Application closed 5/22/24, and then our second meeting in which the grant applicants will make a presentation at will be 5/29/24. And you may or may not have the applications to look at prior to the meeting, depending on the quantity of applications and when they submit. It's okay, that's what we've done in past years too. A lot of times you get the presentations and the application at the same time.
So when is the presentation? Can you just-
They're at that second meeting, so at 5/29.
Okay, so that is the present. Okay,
You're gonna have to change the date for the TDO staff review and.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you said 5/24, the application closes?
right. And then you probably need to change the staff review from 5/24 to 5/28 would be the review period. Which is basically the day before the committee meeting. That still gives 4 days for review.
So we're closing it on the 25th?
24th. 24th is a Friday.
Okay.
And the TDO, the staff review will be the 28th. Is it the holiday? 27th?
20.
With the one before.
The 20, yeah, they'd give a day, 2 days. For review.
Can you do that? Yes, it's up to you.
It'll depend on how many we have, right? But I'll try my hardest.
So we
There's
can't,
5,000,
according,
we'll
just so
figure
everyone
it.
knows, we can't have a meeting in June. It's like a rule. I don't know, it's not my rule, but it's not
That's part
my
of the
rule.
problem, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the county doesn't do committee meetings or board meetings or anything in June. Because that's when everybody takes vacation.
Yeah.
So the application on these score sheets will be submitted to us a week later also then.
Maybe,
Well, it should be submitted to you on the 29th because that's when the committee meeting is. So probably on that, at that meeting is when they'll be handed out.
Okay.
good thing, because then you're listening to the presentation without having a preconceived idea. You just get to listen to the presentation and go through it. I think, yeah. it's positive, right?
yeah.
Okay, let's turn it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I just looking at the calendar, so is there a reason why we can't meet like on the 30th and give staff an extra day to look at those, or do we? Cause the
Absolutely,
30th,
there's no reason.
I'm just, you know, I mean, it's just a question,
I have.
just so that we can give them an extra day, cause. You know,
Is it
and
Thursday?
today's Thursday.
Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking,
Normally we meet on Wednesdays, and so,
Okay.
but we don't have to.
Yeah.
There is no rule like the June rule.
but I don't know, if this,
Thursdays are better.
So I like that. Does that make you give you a little more breathing room? Are you guys okay with that? If we meet on the
Sure.
30th?
Sure.
I think Thursdays is better myself. personally.
Yeah,
I do too.
it's a better day for me, but
Let's go committee. Okay.
we're just changing all the rules. As long as this room's available, but.
Oh, yeah.
We can find a meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say.
So then the
This
rest
room
of
is
it shouldn't
available.
have to change.
Okay.
I said the rest of it shouldn't have to change.
No, we should be
Right.
fine at that point. Okay? Great. Thank you. That makes me feel much better.
Well, I guess that would be my question, if now you're getting it a week later, that cuts the week off of you guys having review time. So you want to give yourself a little bit more time to review it,
I mean, but you're saying we have from the
Completed.
8th to the,
just June 21st to do completed.
Oh, yeah,
spreadsheet.
yeah, we need another week.
yeah, because nothing's gonna happen anyway, because it's
Right,
June.
it's June,
There you-
right.
there you go. So you could do June 28th is a.
Friday.
Friday.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's great.
But
Thank
there's gonna be nobody to turn them into, because you guys are all gonna be gone.
School will be gone, yeah.
I'm gonna close my business for the month.
I'll be here.
Okay.
So we just,
We're not close, they're not closed, we just can't have a meeting about it.
Okay.
All right, so is everyone comfortable with the timeline? Can we move forward? Because then nature of time is gonna.
I was gonna say, I.
You have to
leave
go.
for a meeting.
I
I
have-
have somewhere else I have to be.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave it for them.
Let's just do 2 minutes. I think we can do
If you
it.
can-
I honestly think we can do it. 2
Okay,
minutes.
2 minutes?
Okay, yeah, so page, the other, well, no, okay, well, let's try.
let's try.
Page 14. I will edit this page 14 to be consistent with your motion of no more than $50,000 each.
Yeah.
No more than, yeah, no more than,
Yeah,
more $50,000 cap. Okay, so I will fix page 14 to say that. Then on page 15, this is a pretty easy one. A few people questioned me about this for the meeting. The county attorney's office likes us to use the national average for volunteer hour reimbursement. So if you are claiming a match of volunteer time, you're able to use the $31.80, which is
I would have to say real quick, we have to go back to that page, because if we're lowering the amount of the grant,
It is changing all the bonus
do we
stuff.
want to, yeah, do we even need to do the bonus stuff? Do we want to do the match stuff? So those of you that need to leave, please feel free to leave. We will not hold you hostage. I feel that we have, those of us that can stay and work this out, feel confident, we will
If
do our
two
best.
leave, we still have a forum.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so if you guys need to go,
They go.
please, take me with you.
You can't leave.
30 minutes
Unless Laura Lee takes them.
max, because I'm gonna
I have
fall.
a meeting at 4:30.
Well,
Yeah,
then you, okay, so you'll give us 10 minutes?
I'm gonna have, I can give you like 10 minutes. for
Okay,
that.
let's do it in 10 minutes. I think we can do it in 10 minutes. Okay. If not,
10
then
minutes to it.
that's what I have to call a special meeting. before it- Okay, so this whole thing about is very confusing for me personally, but the match and the bonus points. Do we need a match for a grant? And maybe I should ask.
If you're capping the grant to 50,000, you shouldn't have to have a match
Yeah,
anymore.
match required.
Okay.
But if you want to give them a bonus for
Bonus,
that,
if
you
they do
can,
have extra funds,
you can certainly do that.
that will make it.
Okay, I like it. Make it so. How do we do that at this point?
We move.
And
Yeah, we'll make it the same bonus as it has been in the past for more than 50,000, but. Yeah,
We're not gonna give them more money, though. What they get is more
So
points
They
that they
get,
might
they
have.
get better consideration in the hierarchy.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if they have a match of 25 to 50% of the grant, they get 15 bonus points. If they have more than 50%, they get 10 bonus. points.
Yep. And then just say the
That's
same.
pretty simple.
okay, I like it.
Yep.
Great.
Because that whole paragraph about the grant greater than
And-
50,000 comes out.
And I don't believe we have any leeway on what we can make this number for volunteer hours. I think that you said that is the county attorney that determines that.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, that's what it is. Okay, moving on.
okay.
page 16.
Yes, page 16, there's just one edit I need to make that was a typo. See the second to bottom line, it's 2024 to 2025.
Okay, yeah.
That should be 2026.
Got it.
Yep, and this is all covered in our checklist that we went over at the first part. And then, on page 18, just so you know, this is all determined by our finance department and the finance processing. And that has not changed from last year. That is all the same. And then on page 20 of 37, section 14 on is all set by the legal department. And so we can't change any of that.
Great.
Getting us up to page 27 of
I
37.
just need to back up. Page 17, the scorecards, is this all stay the same? Request must obtain 75% of the standard points to be considered, maximum 105 points.
I believe so. That was
Okay.
always in place.
So everything under
Okay,
50,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so that takes us through the checklist and the guidelines. If we want to make a motion for that piece of it, and then we can look at the application.
I make a
Can I ask
motion.
One question real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a limitation on indirect costs? So some of these universities have pretty high indirect costs. I didn't see anything in there regarding limitations on that.
I don't know what that means. I'm
Well,
sorry.
they're reimbursable, right? So I don't know what you mean by indirect cost, but if.
There are no indirect costs. It's that we only reimburse our costs.
Okay, good. So
It's stated in there. It's pretty detailed. That's the way they can get reimbursement for.
Does that clarify your question?
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I please get a motion for the checklist and guidelines?
I make a motion to approve the checklist and
Second.
with the changes that we've discussed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, good job. I'm going to take 1 minute. Now we're going to score sheet.
Okay, so the score sheet has not changed from last year, and we did spend a lot of time on this last year. It is a little bit of a complicated score sheet because it includes 105 points, not 100. But you do need to score at least 78.75 points out of your 105 to qualify as a grant that will be considered, which is 75% and what the committee agreed to last year. And Charlie, Mr. Venuto just noted that I do have a typo on that page too. It should be 2024-2026 grant at the top of page 28.
Okay.
So that'll edit.
I remember this is very challenging. but
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not sure that the matches that are in the blue box match
No,
what we just.
Oh, you're right. We can just change, instead of saying greater than 50,000, we'll just have
The
matches.
bottom two come
Yeah,
out.
those-
You have no
No.
greater than 50.
no.
Right.
They
But
have
I'm
to
not
be-
sure that the less than 50,000
Not sure.
match up.
Which one do you mean? What
The
are
what?
the less than 50?
Yeah,
He's
so
saying the 5 points and the 10 points. The 25 to 1 and the 50 to 1, is that you're referring to?
Not sure.
The math? Within,
yeah, so it says for the TDC grant request of 50,000 or less, and you get bonus points as follows: a match of 25 to 50%, 15 bonus points are awarded. A match of 50% or greater, 10 bonus points are awarded. But if you look at the thing in the blue box, it's 5 points for 25 and 10
So
points.
they need to be 10 and
So
15.
it needs to be 15. Oh, you know what? That's a typo then. It should be 5 and 10. That match on page 15.
Is the typo.
Yeah, that should be 5 bonus points instead of 15 at the top. Got it?
You're right.
Okay,
okay,
then it
So-
matches the blue box.
I like,
Good catch, exactly.
why we have a,
Right?
one of many reasons, yeah.
So whenever anybody makes a motion to accept that, make sure they accept the change on page 15 now.
Okay. Are we good with the 105 points? We're fine with this? Just.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Boys.
A motion to approve the score sheet with the amended correction of the guidance.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Go, it carries. Great job. And our last thing is the application.
Yes, so the application and page 20, page 32 of 37 and 33 of 37 kind of fall between the application and the grant itself. So we have a new map, which I will say
Beautiful.
was produced by the county GIS. They did an
It's really
amazing
pretty.
job, right? I think it's very clear. And then, we have a new budget worksheet, which we're using, Antonio created for us. It was
Yeah.
was
Simple.
going to be the same for all grant applications.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's a good one.
It has been board accepted in
Oh, it has.
previous,
Awesome.
in previous things, we've used that format with the board and they liked it, so that's why we like to keep it that way. We can-
And then on page 34 through 37, I know it's a little bit hard to read because this comes out of the computer system that we use for the applicant process. But none of that has been changed from last year.
Okay.
And we did spend quite a bit, well,
Yeah.
we did spend quite a bit of time refining that with the exception of page 37 of 37. I tried to make those match the checklist sheet and I checked them real quick, Lori, when you said that they may not match. I think they match. I'll triple check that they're in the same order.
Okay.
For that.
Is that date right there on 13 correct? Should that be October 1, 2024?
Where is that at, Daniel?
Section
It's
number two, it's
page 36.
36, yeah.
There's 2025.
Yeah. I saw that too.
That's gonna be- Will your project be shovel ready by October 1st, 2025? That's different than when your project ends.
But we just
But
said,
yeah, I
oh,
think it's 2024.
It'll be 24.
Yeah.
24.
this is the timeline.
The only thing I'd say about shovel ready is it possible that this is allowing them some prep time and architectural and engineering work and upfront before they actually commence construction on something?
I see, if you leave it 25, then that gives them the whole year, and if
Okay.
you're doing a 2-year cycle, then they would, yes, okay, I like that.
So they could submit it October 1st, 2024, and you'd be good to go.
Right. Sure, they can
Either
submit
way,
it
yeah, as
anytime
long
they
as
want to.
They just can't submit it October 2nd, 2025.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
I like that.
All right, that sounds good.
Or anytime in June.
Okay,
And then the date, the application deadline.
That's be,
37 of 37 needs to be changed.
yeah,
And
so May 24th. I think
it says,
you
yeah,
Yep.
May.
oh, yeah, good, thank you.
And then, I'm sorry, the application, on page 34, if you want to change that to 2026 again, up at the top.
Yes, yes.
I'll do a search for all of those.
Yeah.
Now there's too many to be like, yeah.
I mean, is it clear that it is a 2-year? Is it clear? I mean, I don't know, I'm just,
Well,
asking, is it clear, will they know,
The
people
other-
that do this?
I guess the other part of the discussion is that in the way this is written too, we did give them the ability to finish it in 1 year.
Yeah.
Thinking that we would have a grant every year. So it was just, as an example, if they wanted to apply to plant seagrass. And they knew they could finish it in 1 year, then they would have the opportunity then to apply to plant more seagrass the next year. And so although it is a 2-year grant, if you felt like you could complete it in 1 year, you have the prerogative to finish it in 1 year.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, I gotta go.
Okay, wait, we have just, don't go.
Bar the door.
We just need, I think with the standard typos that we're gonna correct from the dates perspective, the idea of this is that is there any additional changes that need to be made to the application? Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the application with the revisions that we've mentioned and any other typos that you find with the date.
perfect.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, Hunter got you.
Got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Bye.
Great. Thank you for the great work, everyone. I can't thank you enough for your
You have to
time.
join the meeting. You have to join the meeting. Adjourn.
Yes, I will adjourn the meeting. I don't need a motion though, right? The meeting is adjourned.
Nobody.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, thank you for holding.
Bye,
the room.
Daniel.
Yeah,
No, that's a good thing.
I just want to double check the map. I would check.